On this week's episode, we're talking about the best way to name a dental practice, when it's too late to market, and what advice I would give to Tom Brady. Hey everybody, what's up and welcome to the 88 Dental Marketing Show. As you know, this is the internet's only dental show that's answering marketing's most important questions. Don't believe what anybody says, that's how we roll. The night is still young, but so are we. I am your host, Joshua Scott, and this is episode number 16. 16 big episodes, bringing the marketing education. So glad you're with us here today. I appreciate it. Got a good week ahead of us, a good week planned. I've got a speech this week that I'm excited about. And so just to give you a heads up, next week's episode, number 17, may just be a live episode. We're going to try and set that up this week, try and pull that off again. Anytime I'm speaking, it's just, that's a fun thing to do. I think the crowd gets into it. We're in the middle of a speech and it's like, hey, let's stop and shoot a show. So I think they all dig that. They all get into it. And I think it comes off well. So keep your eyes open next week for episode number 17. Could be a live one. It's going to be a great one. That's happening. Also, last week I announced that the show is now available on podcast format on iTunes for your iOS device and Stitcher for your Android device, if that's how you choose to roll. That's there. And if you're like me, sometimes I love the video format, but sometimes watching it is just, it's tough. I'm much more able to listen to things in the car or on an airplane as opposed to sitting down and watching it. So that may work better for you. And then also a few weeks ago, we announced the 88 Dental Facebook page is now up. So thank you for all of those who have gone and liked it. I think when I announced it, we started at like 7 people and now we're up to like 43. So good job. Thanks so much for doing that. If you're here for the first time, find our Facebook page, go and like it. I'll put the link down below. Just scroll down below in the show notes. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, it should just be right down there. Just hit it, like it, you're good to go. And yeah, so that's what's going on. Good week. But for now, let's get to the first question.
Question number 1 comes from Cesar Flores. I recently bought a practice and have to change the name. What's the best way to go about renaming an existing practice?
Caesar, good one, because chances are when you go to buy a practice, you're going to have to change the name. If the name of that practice is in the selling doctor's name, most practices are named after, they're in that doctor's name. It's illegal for you to continue to use his name or her name in that practice. And so in most states that I know of anyway, I should say that. And so you're probably going to have to be required to change it. And so I think there's really 4 approaches when it comes to naming a dental practice, okay? The first one would be kind of the standard, it's your name. It's, Dr. Tom A. Smith or Tom A. Smith DDS. And so that's kind of like a little bit of an old school way to name a dental practice. That used to be what's common. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's a little bit more conservative in nature. I think that it says that about your practice. And so, you just have to know that going into it, but that's a little bit more of kind of what we've seen in the last generation of naming dental practices. The second way would be to take more of a corporate route. To take one of these names that maybe doesn't mean a whole lot, but it expands really well. And so you've got like the Bright Dental, or, this area we've got Aspen Dental or Heartland Dental or Just Smiles, or something that's very thought through, that's very corporate, very branded. There's a lot of like equity in that name. Like it can expand as far as you want it to. That's the good side of it. The downside is it can come off a little corporate. It can come off a little chain sounding. And there are people in small, close-knit suburban communities or urban communities that are looking for something that's a little bit more local, something from their area. And so that could be a little turnoff. Number 3 is what I call location-based. Anymore we've got these planned communities and these master developed communities with names now in our cities. And so here in Columbus, we have one called Polaris. And so this would be like naming the practice Polaris Dental or Polaris Dentistry. And so it's a great play for that area. I mean, it searches super well. If somebody's looking and searching for Polaris Dentist, Polaris Dentistry fits that very well. And so we usually see those practices search better on the whole. Downside is if you're thinking multi-location, multi-doctor, that type of thing, this one can be tricky for sure, because you go to the other end of town and you can't call that one Polaris Dental. It's got to be something else, if it's in a different area. And so you got to kind of think through that and get a little creative there. And then last, I would call it like a branded name. So it's part your name, but part something branded. So you could have like Smith Family Dentistry. You could have More Smiles Dental. Something along those lines where it's a play on your name, but it's a little bit more branded. It's more thought through. It starts to tell a story and become consistent with the brand and what type of practice you're becoming. And so all those have their kind of pros and cons. I mean, if you're Smith Family Dentistry, can that go multi-location? It gets tough. And so sometimes you have to think with the end in mind. What are your goals? What are your strategies for the next 10 years? Stop and think about that and think about the name. But yeah, those are typically the 4 strategies in naming a dental practice.
Our second question is from Lauren Kelly. My practice has stayed busy, so I haven't done much marketing. Is this something I need to be concerned about?
Lauren, I'm glad this has come up because it comes up every so often with me, especially when I'm in a speech and I'm talking to somebody afterwards and they say, I'll call you, but right now my practice is so busy. I really don't need the market. And usually what I tell them and what I'll tell you is just be careful. Marketing is one of those things. Look, marketing is momentum. Marketing in a practice is momentum to that practice. And so the thing about momentum is when you have it, it's great. We love it. I mean, things are going well. Life is good. Everybody's happy. Practice is doing awesome. It's growing. We don't need the market because things are awesome. When you don't have marketing, it's a whole different story. You realize then, you go, oh my gosh, we needed to love the momentum. We needed to baby the momentum and, oh, good momentum. What do you need? And pet the momentum and hug the momentum and kiss the momentum and do everything we can to keep the momentum going. Because when you don't have momentum, man, it's no good. It's a whole different story. And when you lose it, to get it back, it's like pushing a boulder back up the hill. And the amount of effort and energy and resources it takes to get that thing moving again, man, it's tough. And so my advice is, even if you don't need marketing, you should be investing in it anyway. Does it need to be as much? Probably not. Do we need to be a little bit more strategic and just think about where we want to put it? Maybe it's increasing the quality of the patients or a certain service that we're looking at expanding in the practice. Yes, absolutely. But to say we don't need marketing, I'm just telling you, be careful, because what I see is that then that momentum slows down and now we're scrambling to get it back. And the moment you say, I need the market, you're too late. You should have been doing that yesterday, because it just takes too much energy, too much effort, too much resources to get it moving again in the right direction. So make the decision to market before you need to, so that you're not stuck losing momentum.
Question number 3 is from Ben Russo. What do you think about the deflategate scandal? If you were Tom Brady's PR guy, what advice would you give him?
This is not an area this is not a story I know a lot about. I know that the NFL just issued Brady a 4-game suspension for deflating footballs, allegedly deflating footballs against the Indianapolis Colts in the division championship last year. And so now Brady is appealing to the NFL for that. It puts him out until week 6, I believe. He's returning in week 6 next year because of a bye week. And I'm thinking that week 6 game is against Indianapolis in Indianapolis, which would be really interesting to watch that. So, I don't know a whole lot about the story other than that, but here's what I do know, right? So I spent the first 10 years of my life in student work, in teenage youth work. I mean, my education is background is in that. And so I worked in a nonprofit setting with students, with teenagers. And we always had this rule, and we would always encourage our leaders to use this rule and view behavior through this rule. And it was called the 10 times rule. And so what that does is, let's say we're on a weekend getaway or retreat or an event or something with these teenagers, and lo and behold, we find a boy and a girl making out in the back of the bus, right? Like teenagers do. And so you pull them aside and you say, hey, like, what are you doing? And they go, oh my gosh, this is the first time we've ever done it. Oh, I promise you, we've never done this before in our whole life. It was just dark back then. We were alone, and please don't tell my parents. And they do that whole thing. And so what I would do, and I forget where I had learned this, and what we would encourage our leaders to do is, whatever behavior you just saw, the making out, multiply that by 10, and that's really an accurate picture of what's going on. Because most of the time, on the whole, generally in life, what you catch people doing, it's not the first time. And it's not only not the first time, but take that and multiply it by 10, and now you probably have an accurate picture of what you're looking at. And so, when the NFL comes out and issues a report and says there's strong evidence that footballs were probably tampered with by Brady and the equipment manager, and there's a few other people that were named, you go, you can apply this filter and you can step back and go, oh my gosh, is this the first time they have ever done this? Is this the first time that they've ever cheated? Or, cheated is a strong word. Is this the first time they've ever maybe bent the rules or did something unethical? And the fact is, it's probably not. The fact is, you take that behavior, multiply it by 10, and you have a more accurate picture of what we're dealing with. And so, on the whole, it's a good filter to view life with. And so I think if I was Tom Brady's PR guy, because what they're doing right now is they're like, oh my gosh, 4 games, this is ridiculous. It's and they're blowing up about 4 games because it's from the presumption that he's innocent, that he's an angel, that nothing has ever happened, and this is just so completely ridiculous that this is even happening. But if you take that behavior and go multiply it by 10, and that's really what we're dealing with, then honestly, a 4-game suspension is nothing. It's probably the least of his problems. And so, is he doing the right thing by appealing? I'm not kind of judging his PR guy and saying if it's right or wrong. I think it's the play that they have to make. I think that's the story they have to tell and be consistent with. Is this was the first time. I mean, it's not even the first time. It's like, this never happened. This is completely crazy that Tom Brady would be involved in this mess. He's an upstanding, not only NFL player, but citizen and person and human. And so they're going that route. And so, that's really all I know about that. For what it's worth. Hope it helps. Guys, thanks so much for being a part of episode number 16. Your homework. When was a time in your practice or in your company when you had momentum, and when was a time you didn't have momentum? What were you doing when you had it? What were you doing when you didn't have it? How did those times feel? If you had to go back, what could you do differently? Do a little momentum assessment on your practice. That is your homework, guys. Thanks so much for being here. I will see you next week on episode number 17.